My husband called me worthless the day he threw me out. He was standing in a house I paid for, holding keys to cars I bought, surrounded by properties with my name on every original deed. He just didn't know that last part yet. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the moment his voice cracked through the foyer of a six-bedroom mansion, my mansion, while his mother stood behind him nodding like she was conducting an orchestra. "You contributed nothing," he said. The words bounced off marble I'd chosen, echoed through rooms I'd designed. Loud enough for the neighbors to hear through the open front door. Loud enough for our 12-year-old daughter to press her face into a pillow upstairs and pretend she was somewhere else. I didn't flinch, didn't cry. I picked up my purse, walked past both of them, and got into my car. Because here's the thing, I already knew what they'd done. Rewind. 8 years before that day, I was 29, working 70-hour weeks as a commercial property appraiser while Marcus sold insurance part-time and played golf the rest. We lived in a duplex I'd bought with my own savings before we even got engaged. Rent from the other unit covered the mortgage. That duplex was the seed of everything. By year 2 of our marriage, I'd flipped it into a second property. Marcus handled none of the paperwork, none of the contractor negotiations, none of the 2 a.m. calls about burst pipes in January. What he handled was appearances, the right car, the right watch, the right story at dinner parties about our portfolio. I let him tell it. That was my mistake. By year 4, I owned 3 rental units outright. By year 6, the portfolio was worth just over $4 million. 7 properties. Every deed had my name on it because I was the one who sat at every closing table, signed every document, shook every hand. Marcus's credit score couldn't have gotten him a used Honda, let alone a commercial loan. Courts actually see this pattern more often than people think. One spouse builds the financial architecture while the other contributes almost nothing, then claims half or more during a divorce. What Marcus had planned was something far worse than simply claiming a share. He wasn't going to split what I built. He was going to erase me from it entirely. 3 months before that scene in the foyer, I'd gone to refinance one of the rental properties, a fourplex near downtown that cleared $8,000 a month. Routine. I'd done it before. The loan officer pulled the title report and paused. Then she turned her screen toward me. My name wasn't on the deed anymore. A quitclaim deed had been filed 11 months earlier, transferring my ownership interest to Marcus's mother, Diane. My signature was on it. Notarized, dated, filed with the county. Except, I never signed it. I sat very still in that loan officer's chair. The fluorescent lights hummed above us. Someone's phone rang in another office. I asked her to print the document. She did. I held it up close, studied the handwriting, and felt something cold settle into my chest. Not anger, not yet. Recognition. I recognized the slight upward curl on the S. The way the loop on the Y was too wide. Marcus had watched me sign hundreds of documents over the years. He'd practiced. What I didn't know yet, what would take me another 2 weeks to uncover, was that this wasn't the only one. In North Carolina, forging a deed isn't just a betrayal, it's a felony. Using that forged document to actually transfer property is a second, separate felony charge. And the person who taught Marcus exactly how to structure these transfers, how to backdate trust agreements to make them look years old, how to move assets to a family member with the plan of reclaiming them after the divorce was finalized. That was Diane. His mother had walked him through every step. She'd found the notary, a cousin of hers, from 2 towns over. She drafted the template for the quitclaim deeds herself, pulling language from legal websites. This wasn't impulsive. This was a months-long project, mother and son, working together to strip me of everything I'd spent a decade building. By the time Marcus stood in that foyer calling me worthless, he and Diane believed they'd already won. They'd filed transfers on 4 of the 7 properties. Diane had popped a bottle of champagne the night the last filing went through. Marcus told me that himself later, though he didn't mean to. They were celebrating in a house that still had my fingerprints on every light switch, my sweat in every wall. And I let them celebrate. I let them think the silence meant I didn't know. Tell me where you're watching from. Because what they didn't realize was that I'd already made copies of every original deed. Every single one. And I hadn't told a soul. The night Marcus threw me out, Diane hugged him on the porch. I could see them in the rearview mirror, standing under the porch light I'd installed myself, clinking glasses. They were standing in my house, drinking my champagne, celebrating a victory that existed only on paper I was already in the process of shredding. 6 weeks later, a bank in Charlotte flagged the title on our rental property on Belmont Avenue. Marcus called me. First time since the night he threw me out. His voice had that particular strain, a man who needs something but would rather choke than admit it. There's some kind of hold on the Belmont property. He said it like he was reporting the weather. Bank won't process the refinance. Did you do something? I hadn't done anything. Not yet. What I'd done was move into a studio apartment 2 states away. Reverted to my maiden name on every new document. Spent my evenings at a FedEx office making certified copies of originals I'd pulled from our safe deposit box the morning before everything fell apart. The notary stamps. The deed transfers. Every document that bore my actual signature next to every document where someone had tried very hard to replicate it. The title cloud? That wasn't me. A forged deed can create what's called a cloud on the property title, blocking sales, refinancing, and estate transfers until a court resolves it. Marcus had forged my signature on ownership documents for at least 2 properties. The system was catching up to him all on its own. He just didn't know that yet. I didn't do anything, Marcus. True enough. Maybe call your mother's lawyer. 4 full seconds of silence. Then he hung up. The call I received 3 days later came from someone I never expected to hear from. Gerald Pratt. Commercial real estate developer who'd been trying to acquire 2 of our mixed-use buildings on the east side for over a year. Marcus had turned him down repeatedly. Always smugly. Always publicly. Gerald wasn't the kind of man who forgot that. Mrs. Ellison, he said. Except I hadn't been Mrs. Ellison for 6 weeks. It's Caldwell now. Miss Caldwell. He corrected himself without missing a beat. I understand you and your husband have had a change in circumstances. I want to be straightforward with you. I believe some of the property transfers your husband executed may not have been entirely legitimate. My chest tightened, not from surprise. From the particular feeling of hearing someone else finally say out loud what you've been whispering to yourself in a rented apartment at 2 in the morning. Why are you calling me, Gerald? Because I think we can help each other. Gerald Pratt didn't care about justice. Let me be clear about that. He wanted those buildings. He saw my situation as leverage. But what he offered was something I couldn't get on my own. Access to a forensic document examiner his legal team kept on retainer. A real estate attorney who specialized in title fraud. So I met him. Tuesday afternoon. Conference room in Raleigh that smelled like leather and old money. I brought a banker's box. His attorney, a woman named Sharon Chen, opened the first folder and went quiet for a long time. These notary dates don't match the filing dates. She pulled 2 deeds side by side. This one was supposedly notarized on March 14th, but the county stamp shows it was filed on February 28th. That's impossible. I nodded. She held up the second document, the transfer that moved our duplex into Diane's name. My signature sat at the bottom in blue ink. Confident. Slanted slightly left. I'm right-handed. My signature slants right. Always has. Sharon looked at me over her glasses. You didn't sign this. Do you have the original deed? The one with your actual signature? I pulled it from the bottom of the box. Certified copy, stamped and sealed, dated 14 months before Marcus's forged version. Sharon placed them side by side. Even Gerald leaned forward. The differences weren't subtle. They were damning. Stroke pressure. Letter spacing. The way I always loop my capitals C. Someone had tried to copy my handwriting from a photograph, maybe a scan. They'd gotten close enough to fool a county clerk. Not close enough to fool the woman who signed the real one. There are 3 more like this, I said. The room went still. Marcus hadn't just forged one document in a moment of desperation. He'd built an entire architecture of fraud, backdated transfers, fabricated trust agreements, forged signatures. All of it designed to strip me of everything I'd spent a decade building while making it look like I'd never owned any of it. Sharon closed the folder. Miss Caldwell, your husband didn't just commit forgery. If he filed any of these with a sworn affidavit, that's perjury. That evening, I sat in my car in the parking garage. 3 words, 2 syllables. My whole life was about to change direction, and this time, I was the one holding the wheel. A county records alert I'd set up weeks ago. Marcus had just filed a new affidavit with the county recorder's office, swearing under oath that the Belmont property had always belonged to his mother's trust. I had the original deed in my trunk, with both our real signatures. Dated 3 years before his so-called trust ever existed. He'd just committed perjury, and I had the proof. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid, because I was waiting. At 6:47 the next morning, my attorney filed the emergency fraud petition with the court. By 8:15, a judge had signed a temporary restraining order freezing every joint account, every credit line, every financial instrument connected to Marcus Caldwell or Diane Caldwell's so-called family trust. Every single one. I know the exact moment Marcus found out. My phone rang at 9:02. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. 7 calls in 11 minutes, the kind of rapid-fire dialing that happens when someone tries to buy coffee and watches their card decline in front of a stranger. He left one voicemail. His voice cracked on the second word. "What did you do?" "I saved it. My attorney would need it later." What followed over the next 72 hours wasn't chaos. It was architecture. Every motion I filed had been drafted weeks in advance, each exhibit numbered and cross-referenced in a binder my forensic accountant had reviewed twice. The emergency fraud petition didn't just allege forgery. It laid out a timeline, month by month, document by document, showing exactly how Marcus and Diane had manufactured a paper trail designed to strip me of everything I'd built during 14 years of marriage. The backdated trust agreements were the centerpiece. Diane had created them to make it look like Marcus's shares in our real estate holdings had always belonged to her family trust, not to our marriage. But trust documents require notarization. The notary whose stamp appeared on those agreements? She'd retired in 2019, a full 2 years before the documents were supposedly executed. My attorney's investigator confirmed it in a single phone call. The notary remembered nothing, because she'd never seen them. Marcus's own legal counsel now had a problem. A serious one. When my attorney served the subpoena on Gerald Whitfield, the lawyer Marcus had hired to handle the property transfers, something shifted that I hadn't anticipated. Whitfield didn't fight it, didn't file a motion to quash. His office called mine within 48 hours, requesting a meeting. Gerald Whitfield wanted to cooperate. Turns out, Marcus had lied to his own attorney, told Whitfield that I had voluntarily signed over my interest in the properties, that the transfers were part of an amicable separation agreement we'd reached privately. Whitfield had processed the paperwork in good faith, or so he claimed, never realizing the signatures were forged, never questioning the backdated trust documents Diane had provided. The moment Whitfield saw my original deeds, the ones with both our real signatures, predating every single trust document by years, his face apparently went white. My attorney told me he sat very still for a long time, then said 5 words, "I need my own lawyer." By that Friday, Gerald Whitfield had formally withdrawn as Marcus's attorney. Continuing would have put his own license at risk. Marcus was now without legal counsel, without access to funds, and without the one attorney who understood the full scope of what he'd done. Diane called me that Saturday, first time she'd spoken to me directly since the night Marcus changed the locks. Her voice was different, smaller. The commanding tone that had once directed me to use coasters on her son's furniture was gone, replaced by something breathless and unsteady. "Elena, sweetheart, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Marcus never meant to." "Diane." I kept my voice level, almost gentle. "Your notary retired 2 years before she supposedly stamped your trust documents. There's no misunderstanding here. The kind of silence that stretches so long you can hear someone's entire strategy collapsing behind it." She hung up without another word. The courtroom smelled like floor wax and old coffee. No cameras. No jury. Just a conference table. Fluorescent lights humming overhead, and Marcus sitting across from me in a suit I'd bought him 4 Christmases ago. Diane beside him, wearing reading glasses I'd never seen before, as though she'd aged a decade in 6 weeks. His attorney slid papers across the table. Mine slid papers back. Nobody raised their voice. Nobody needed to. The deal had been negotiated over 11 days. My legal team laid it out with the kind of precision that leaves no room for interpretation. Marcus and Diane would sign a written admission of fraud. Every forged deed, every backdated trust agreement, every falsified notary stamp. And that admission would be filed as a public record with the county recorder's office, attached permanently to every property title they had contaminated. In exchange, I wouldn't pursue criminal prosecution for the felony forgery charges, or the perjury count from that last affidavit he'd been foolish enough to file. His attorney had fought this condition hardest. A public admission meant it would follow them into every future transaction, mortgage applications, business filings, background checks. Property lawyers call it a cloud on credibility. No amount of time clears it. Marcus stared at the document for almost 4 minutes. I counted. His jaw worked side to side the way it always did when he wanted to argue but couldn't find the angle. Diane signed first. Her hand trembled. The pen scratched across the paper like a nail dragged slowly across glass. Then Marcus. He looked at me before he picked up the pen, searching my face for something. Satisfaction, maybe. Gloating. Some flicker of the woman he'd convinced himself was too soft to fight back. I gave him nothing. He signed. Outside the building, the November air hit sharp and clean. My attorney shook my hand, said she'd call Monday to finalize the LLC transfer documents, and walked toward the parking structure. I was halfway to my car when I heard his footsteps behind me. I kept walking. Elena, wait. Please. There had been a time when that crack in his voice would have made me turn around, made me soften, made me sit down at the kitchen table and listen while he explained why whatever he'd done wasn't really what it looked like. I stopped walking. Turned. Not because he asked, because I wanted to see his face clearly, in daylight, one final time. I never wanted it to go this far. Mom convinced me the properties would be safer in Marcus. My voice was level, flat as a courthouse floor. You forged my signature on documents that transferred my assets into trusts that never legally existed. Then swore under oath those trusts were real. That's not something someone convinced you to do. That's something you chose. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. I walked away before he found the words. Whatever he was about to say, I didn't need it. By spring, the portfolio was restructured entirely under my LLC. The Belmont property, the one Marcus had sworn belonged to his mother's phantom trust, sold for 12% above asking price. I rolled the proceeds into 2 commercial spaces downtown. Hired a property manager and a forensic accountant who now reviews every document before I sign anything. The business is worth more now than it was before Marcus touched it. Here's the part nobody tells you about winning. The morning after the courtroom, I woke up in my apartment, mine, lease in my name, furnished with things I chose, and felt absolutely nothing. No triumph. No relief. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that settles in after a storm has passed and you realize the house is still standing but the landscape around it has completely changed. That emptiness lasted about a week. Then something else moved in. Not happiness exactly. Clarity. The particular, bone-deep understanding that I had built something real, watched someone try to erase me from my own life, and refused. I don't tell this story because I want applause. I tell it because financial abuse within a marriage is designed to be invisible, the manipulation so skilled, the gaslighting so constant, that you start questioning whether the ground beneath you was ever solid. It was. You built it, and the records don't lie. Even when the people around you do. If any part of this story felt familiar, if you recognize something in it that you haven't said out loud yet, I'd want to hear from you. Drop it in the comments. Subscribe. Next week's story is one I almost didn't tell.